Some have said that the direction of your focus is the direction of your life. For the Christian, our focus is crystal clear. We are to look to Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. In every area of life, we are to lay aside the hindrances of our Christian journey and look to Christ as our example and strength to live the life He has called us to live. So today, let's starve our distraction and feed our focus on the Lord Jesus Christ. Welcome to the Walk Talks podcast and today's Friday Focus episode.
Welcome back to the Southland podcast. This is our second ladies edition, and we are really excited about the conversation we're going to have today. Our topic today is on priorities and just how to balance family and marriage with ministry and what that looks like and how practically we can help that and improve that in our own lives.
And today we are bringing in Bethlie Young. I'd like her to kind of introduce herself. She has her own podcast. She has her own ministry in evangelism with her husband, Dave. So would you like to just tell us a little bit about your family and ministry?
Sure. Thank you, Emily and Emaley, for inviting me. I am honored, honestly, to be a part of this podcast. We do have a podcast, David and I, the Keeping It Young podcast, which is all about marriage and family and ministry life. That is the byline. And so we would love for you to tune in and listen to that one if you haven't. But we have traveled in evangelism for 30 years. We have been married for 31 years. We have 5 children and raised them all on the road. And we still have one left at home. She still travels with us full time. But we have 3 that are married. They're all in ministry. We never called them to ministry. And we even told them, you know what? Whatever the Lord wants you to do, that's what we want you to do, not ministry. So people often will say, how did you get all your kids to go into ministry? That wasn't us. That was God. And so they're all in ministry. We have 2 grandchildren. Our 4th child is in Bible college. He is studying youth ministry. So yes, we have lived family life and ministry life. Mm-hmm. And I do understand that there does need to be a discussion often about how to balance that.
Yeah. So kind of to just start off with our discussion, what would you say are some biblical principles that we can kind of lay as the foundation for this topic as far as prioritizing family and then versus ministry as well?
Right. Well, I would go, first of all, right away to the book of Genesis, because in the book of Genesis, we see that God established the home first. He created male and female, and he said they were very good together. Once you get into chapter 2, then you get a broader picture of the story where Adam already had a job. He had, if you will, a ministry that God had put him in. He was the keeper of the garden. He was naming all of the animals, which I find so amazing. And so he had this job, and God looked at him and said, you know what? It's not good for him to be alone. We need to create a helpmeet for him. So right away, even in the first couple of chapters, we see that God established the home. So we know that God, his heartbeat is for marriage and family. Mm. And it's not that everyone is to be married. We know that some are called to singleness. We know that there are even some couples who would desire children, and for whatever reason, the Lord has not blessed them with children. But God has established the home. First of all, we see in the New Testament that the church is established. And we know that it is from the heartbeat of God because we know that Jesus loved the church and he gave himself for it. And so what we think of as ministry, every ministry that we know of branches out of the church. We have the church itself and all the ministries that go with that, whether that be music, children's ministry, evangelism, outreach. Then you have Christian education. You have camp ministries such as Southland. All of that branches from the church. So we know that God's heartbeat is, yes, I have established the home, and it's a ministry in and of itself, and I have established the church, which is ministry. But I think just the principle of what was established first, we know that it was the home. And we can even go from there and we see perhaps Proverbs 31, the Proverbs 31 woman, which is such an inspiration, and also one of those things that you're just like, really? Did you really do all of that? She is such an example to us because she was virtuous, and the Bible says that she had value, and her whole priority was her home. She did stuff outside of her home, but all that she did was to better her home. It was to further things in her home. And then another place where we could say that the Bible has put a higher priority on the home is in Titus chapter 2, where there is the mandate for the older women to be teaching the younger women. And the Bible tells us that they are to be teaching the younger women to walk in holiness. So there's that discretion, that sobriety, all of those things. But they are also to be teaching the younger women to be keepers at home and to love their husbands and to love their children. And I find it amazing and ironic that they don't have to teach the younger women how to work outside of their home. They don't have to teach younger women how to desire something other than marriage and family. They don't have to teach them how to go to Christian college and learn how to do whatever. They don't even have to teach them how to do ministry, but they do have to teach them, you need to be a keeper of your home. So just from those passages, we see that God established the home first, and that should be a priority.
That is so helpful. All those passages also have specific things that say about women, which I think is super powerful.
Yes.
Just even coming from a ministry wife yourself and going into ministry ourselves, it's a temptation to get overwhelmed with that aspect of it, but just realizing that God has given us that priority of our relationships, of our family,
right?
And that is kind of the building block even for our church ministry. To go along with that, how can young wives and mothers balance practically? How can we balance the demands of family and children with our church opportunities? What are some non-negotiables with each?
Right.
You should be involved in church, obviously.
Yes.
But what are the, non-negotiables? Yeah.
Well, a good word there is balance, although it's never found in the Word of God. We never see that God has said, you need to be balanced here. We hear it a lot in Christianity today.
Right.
But we also do know that He established the home and He established the church, so that if we fall into a ditch on either side there, then we have the negative repercussions. Like in recent culture, in church culture, there is kind of a backlash against young couples who were maybe raised in a ministry home where they felt that the church was more important than the home. And maybe they have some hurts or wounds from my parents didn't pay enough attention to me. We were dragged everywhere instead of having family time. My dad thought that being at the church was more important than being home with us, things like that. So there is that, and understandably, a backlash of, we're not going to do that. We're not going to put the ministry above the home. And in a biblical view, they're right. They are right. But you can also fall into that ditch of family is everything. And we do have to remember that God did establish the church. So we do have to give time and effort to the church so that the balance comes in when you know what the priorities are. I would say, especially for young marrieds, young mamas, sometimes it is tempting to feel like church attendance isn't that important. And we do have to remember, Christ loved the church. He gave himself for it. It is important. And you reap the benefits of so many things. Mm-hmm. We forget that as a mom, as a wife, we don't have time to spend hours and hours and hours and hours in the Word of God. But we get to church and we reap the benefits of that. We get the blessing of corporate worship. We get the blessing of corporate prayer, of sharing our burdens one for another. We get the encouragement and edification from other believers. So it is very important. So establishing that and thinking to yourself, you know what? Yes, the baby's on a schedule, but the schedule can flex on Sunday. Mm-hmm. It's okay. If the baby doesn't get his nap, if they go to bed later. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many times we've been in special meetings, and that's mostly what our calling is, and you two do this too, on the road. You go on the road and you do special meetings. Now, special meetings take a lot more effort for the lady of the home. She's got to plan meals earlier, all of the things. And I don't know how many times we've been, we call it de-greeting when people are leaving. When we're de-greeting people, and they're leaving, I don't know how many times young moms will come through and they'll shake hands and they'll say, that was so good, but we won't be here this week because that's the kid's bedtime. And you know what? I understand. I do. When those babies get off schedule, it's hard. Mm-hmm. But we have to sometimes flex the schedule for the things of the Lord. So I would say like church should be a non-negotiable. Mm-hmm. But then when you're coming to the ministries outside of that, whether it's church attendance, whether it's, different things like that, maybe a connect group that your church has for your age group, maybe that should be a non-negotiable. But anything outside of that, where they're asking you to maybe run something, or they're asking you to help with a Bible study or do a hospitality ministry or whatever, all of that then should be prayerfully considered for season of life. I'm in a season of life where I can attend a Bible study that doesn't have childcare because I don't need childcare. Right. But some of the girls out there listening, maybe there is a Bible study you would love, love, love to go to it, but they don't offer childcare. You know what? That Bible study is not for you right now. Mm-hmm. And it's okay because you can get the Word of God through other things. So prayerfully considering, if you've been asked to run a ministry, say, can I pray about that? And pray about it. And then I would say also for those of us who are married, ask your husband because he has great insight into all that we do. I know sometimes we think our husband has no idea what all we do for a day. And he doesn't know all the little details, but he does know we're busy. He does. So that he gives incredible insight to, you know what, I just don't think right now that's a good thing for you, or that would be great for you. That will give you an hour out every week where you can use your gifts and talents for the Lord. That would be wonderful. And so just relying on him, I know also in my life, it's a wonderful thing when I go to David and he says, I don't think that's a good idea for you right now. And I can honestly say, my husband said no. I love that. Yes. I love that. So I don't know if all of that made sense, but I think that prayerfully considering those other ministry opportunities, but making things like church, Sunday school, those are priorities. Special meetings, that should be a priority. We can flex the schedule some with that.
Yeah, I really like what you said about the season of life because everybody is in a different season of life, and you have a congregation or maybe a ladies' Bible study, and all of those ladies might be in a completely different stage of life. And I think sometimes our tendency is to compare ourselves.
Yes.
And be like, oh, but they can do it. Like, why can't I?
Right.
But the season of life maybe just it's not working for you right now, and that's okay. I think we beat ourselves up over that sometimes.
We can. And I even have known some young ladies who are truly gifted by God to do certain things. Mm-hmm. And when marriage and family come around, they're thinking, oh, the Lord's not using me like he was. Mm-hmm. I'm not doing what I should be doing. And so first of all, can I say to all of you, you are. Mm-hmm. God is using those talents and abilities. No one else sees it, maybe, except for your husband and your children. But they do see it. And they will rise up and call you blessed. They will. Yeah. If you continue to follow God. And when you hit that season again where you are a little more free, God will use you. Mm-hmm. He does. He doesn't forget that you have all these talents and say, you know what, I'm going to give you a setback. I'm going to give you a baby. He doesn't do that. He is blessing you. We know from the Bible that children are an heritage of the Lord. They are a blessing. They are a good thing. And so pouring your gifts and talents into them and then allowing the Lord to open that door again later in another season of life and not pushing the door open. I have seen so many young ladies who, to the detriment of their family, are like, no, I am gifted in this area. I am going to do this right now. I am going to lead this ladies' Bible study, or I am going to teach this children's class, or whatever it is, and then it is to the detriment of their family, if only because they are frustrated all the time because they don't have time for that. Yeah. When they push that door through, they don't have quite the blessing. And if you wait for God to bring it around again, it's sweeter. The fruit is sweeter. The blessings are sweeter. You are more relaxed about it. It's a wonderful thing.
Now, this question I just thought of.
Okay.
That's kind of not really on my list.
Okay.
But out of curiosity, what would you say are some signs of that burnout, or the fact, maybe some telltale signs that your family may be suffering from you overworking yourself in the church, or vice versa? Like, what are some things you've observed practically that are like, they kind of...
Red flags. Maybe.
Yeah, red flags of, ooh, maybe that person is overextended in their
Or maybe you yourself have experienced.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
we all have at some point.
Yes. When you are in what we call full-time ministry, where you do this all the time, that's where your paycheck comes from. Really, you live by faith, and the Lord takes care of you in that way. I think there are a few words to think of: flexibility, evaluation, and an awareness. So sometimes it's so easy just to be flying through life and doing what you do. This is what God's called us to do, so we got to do it. We're going to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and we're going to do it. Especially if you've grown up in it. I grew up in a pastor's home, and so ministry is just second nature. We eat, breathe, sleep. Ministry is what we do. And so you're just pushing and pushing and pushing, and sometimes our awareness is not there that something is lacking. Maybe it's a sweetness in your marriage. Maybe it's the lack of a mom's ability to be sweet with her children. She finds herself always snapping at them. It could be that you're not sleeping well because you're worried about everything that's going on, or you're not eating well. You're not taking care of yourself. You don't have time for some exercise, or whatever it is. So you're just flying through, and all of a sudden you are smacked up the side of the head with something. All of a sudden, you and your husband are past the point of we're not sweet to each other all the time, and you are just really at each other. And all of a sudden, you're like, wait a minute, what is going on? Why are we just at such differences right now? We can't seem to even have a conversation without disagreeing. Those are huge red flags. So it's wonderful in ministry to... Can I say, keep your finger on the pulse all the time? And not something that you have to be worried about. It's not something that, if you and your husband have a disagreement, like, we must be doing too much. You're going to have disagreements.
Right.
You are. So it's not that. But if it's just a constant, that's a huge red flag. So instead of getting there, just this awareness of where are we? And having those communication times, asking your husband, am I doing too much? I feel a little overextended right now. God does sometimes call us to overextension. He does. He doesn't promise us that we will be well rested. He just says, come unto me and I will give you rest, meaning my soul, my spirit will be at rest. But if you have come to a point where your soul and spirit cannot be at rest, that's another red flag. You need to say, okay, Lord, what do I need to do? Another thing with the children are just tiny humans. They get tired, they get hungry, they get frustrated, they get irritated, just like we do. They just don't know what to do with it. Like, hopefully we have gotten some maturity and wisdom and we know what to do with it. So just being aware of that. I know I've sometimes been in church lobbies and children, after church Sunday morning, Children are done. They are done. They just want to go get a nap. We used to pray, Lord, please don't let people judge our children on Sundays. Please let them get a little rest. And on Monday night, then people see that, yes, they can behave well. Because we would go out to eat with pastors and they would just be a mess. They didn't want to be out to eat with a pastor. They didn't want to eat whatever the restaurant food was, and they just wanted to go home and get a nap. So, but sometimes moms are like, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. They're not. They're not fine.
Right.
And so it's okay to be like, I'm sorry, it's past their nap time. We're going to get them a nap. And then being gracious towards your child, just being aware of them. So if you're finding yourself pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing your children, that's not healthy for them. So that would be another red flag where, okay, we need to take a step back and maybe let something go. I know in the, and I'm not slamming on Christian school world at all. I was raised in a Christian school. But we have homeschooled all of our children. And the more we get mature in the ministry and we watch ministries that have Christian schools, they are so scheduled. You know, it's even difficult to have a revival meeting anymore because they're like, well, we have practices and we have games and we have this and we have that. And I know some of my friends whose kids are in the Christian school, they've even had to say, you know, these are good things. These are good things. But this year we're only going to play one sport. You choose. So you're not going to play all year long so that we're running, because there are other priorities we need. Our marriage and family, and then our church ministries.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think also just being aware of our own tendencies. Like, for example, I do struggle to say no.
Yes.
Like that kind of thing where we just need to be willing to just humble ourselves and, you know what, this is a weakness for me. And sometimes it takes, you know, my husband or somebody that I work closely with to be like, you know what, I think maybe you need to take a step back.
Right.
And that takes a lot of humility on our part. But just being willing to see where we need to grow personally,
Right.
I think is key as well.
Yep.
Okay, Bethlie, I would love to hear some just really practical advice for guiding your kids in some of those priorities as you're making those choices. How do you let your kids know why you're doing a certain ministry and why you're not? How do you get them involved in ministry with you as well to make it a family thing?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, you make family life fun. And that was a goal for us, that we didn't want our children growing up knowing that we're a ministry family and being like, well, that was terrible. I don't want my kids to do that. We wanted them still to enjoy it. So we chose for our family verse, serve the Lord with gladness, so that we wanted our children to know that serving the Lord and everything that we do still has joy in it. It's not just, oh, okay, here we go again. Here we go to another church. Here we, you know. And another thing that we did is we tried with everything in us not to speak negatively about what we, quote unquote, had to do. You know, and you guys travel in evangelism. You know that it's pretty much nonstop. You finish a meeting and then you get in your car and you go to another one, so that while everyone else at that last meeting is like, oh, that was really good, but I'm exhausted and now I'm going to rest. Well, we're not. We're just going to the next one. We were aware of that, and we can talk about that in a little bit. We wanted our kids to get actual bodily rest, and we needed bodily rest. But we never wanted to get in the truck for that next meeting and be like, man, we have to do this again. It was more like, we get to go do this again. We get to serve the Lord, and we get to be with people who love God. And because they love God, they will love us. And we are going to have so much fun at this next meeting. You're going to meet new friends. And we even would, the whole thing about church playgrounds, I mean, if we pulled in a parking lot and they had a playground, then we could capitalize on that. We'd be like, look, you have your own playground all week long. And you get to play on that. Look at that. Other kids they only get to play on this when they come to church, but you're going to be parked here all day. You're going to have it all to yourself. all day long. Or if they had a gymnasium, oh my goodness, they have a gymnasium. You guys can go over and play basketball or volleyball or whatever in the gymnasium, especially if it's raining. I hate to even say this, but our kids learned how to break into gymnasiums because we didn't always have a key. Sorry
hilarious.
to all of you people out there like, did the Youngs break into our gymnasium? The kids needed to get out of the RV after school was done. They need to run, they need to play, and the pastor is nowhere to be found. And so, yes, sorry about that. But you just focus on the positives. And then another thing that we learned to do, we had a dear friend, pastor friend. He is a mentor to our family. We still, to this day, David will call him if we need advice about all kinds of things. But we were at their church in a meeting, and on the last night, he sat my husband down and he said, okay, your kids are doing well. You're working on them. You're training them. They seem to love ministry. But what are you doing to play with your kids? And David was really taken aback by this. He was like, I mean, we do. We go out on the playground with them sometimes during the day, whatever. And he said, your kids need a day where they just have your attention. And they need you to play with them. Now, this was hard to put into our schedule because you guys know every church is different. They all have demands. Some of them are fellowshipy. Some of them are, you're on your own, whatever. So you were just, at their mercy, really. So this was a little bit difficult for us, but we came up with Fun Family Friday. And we didn't do school on Friday. Sorry to all the homeschool people out there. You're all like twitching right now. You're like, oh no. But see, we traveled all day Saturday. We couldn't play on Saturday. They were a captive audience on Saturday. They can do school in the truck. It's a little more difficult, but they can do it. Not penmanship. You don't make your kids do penmanship in the truck. But anyway, we would then carve out time. Sometimes David still had a chapel he needed to do Friday morning. So obviously he's going to fulfill that obligation. But when that was done, we tried not to hurt feelings, but we would say, we need Friday. We're not going to do a meal with anybody. We're going to just take that time. And we would look up things to do in the area, free things to do in the area, because, you have to be careful about finances, but we did some of the most fun things, and our kids looked forward to that. And we looked forward to that. Sometimes it was a sacrifice for us. We don't want to go to find another park and do, whatever. Right. But once we got there, we could have Fun Family Friday. And so just that balance of, yes, we're going to serve the Lord with gladness. We're going to enjoy this. It's going to be great. You're going to make great friends. We get to impact these people for Jesus. Look how many people got saved last week. Isn't that wonderful? Praise the Lord. But also, hey, we're going to stop it all and we're going to go have fun.
So valuable.
Yeah, I think that kids really notice what you prioritize too. I mean, I think back to my childhood and growing up. I'm one of 10 kids, and we were a family that was in ministry, and we were at church all the time. It seemed like we were the last ones to leave every Sunday and Wednesday. And I think I noticed when my parents took time out of their busy schedule to spend time with us. And I also noticed when they took the time to involve us in their ministry. Right. And that, I think kids notice that more than maybe we realize. And they remember that. I mean, I do. And it's definitely made an impact on how I even view ministry now. So I think that's really important.
It is. And they watch our examples so that if we are constantly complaining, if we are constantly like, oh, one more time, I have to do this again, they see that. And then they equate all of the burdens of ministry, and ministry does have a burden aspect. It just does. Mm-hmm. If all they equate ministry with is the burden, then they're not going to love it. And our children, just by God's grace, they have seen ministry not through rose-colored glasses. They do understand that there are some difficulties, but they do see more the blessing of it. And I love watching them now all do their own ministry and figure out that balance on their own. Yeah. We have sometimes as parents of adult children, we have watched them and we're like, oh, woo, you guys are doing a lot. But also we understand that at this season of life that they can. They can just go. And, something that would in our 50-year-old bodies, we would be like, no, cannot go that much. They can. And it's a blessing to watch because they do it with joy.
Yeah. Kind of shifting gears a little bit. We talked about kids and how we can bring them along in our ministry. But what about marriage? How have you set up your marriage for success when you also have you have 5 kids and then you're also in ministry full time? What does that look like? And maybe what are some practical ways that you set your marriage up for success in that area?
Well, when we first got married, I would hear about marriage and ministry and how the ministry can be hard on your marriage because you're going and you're always with other people. But seriously, when we were first married, I was like, what's hard about this? Isn't that hard? Because we were serving together and we still have that aspect. And I love that. There is joy in serving together. But sometimes, maybe when the ministry really gets moving or maybe when the babies come along, it just can get a little harder. And especially being on the road, we weren't in a place where the grandparents could watch the children so that we could go on a date, or people that we knew. We're in churches with people we do not know. And while we loved them and we wanted to serve them, they were not going to watch our children because we didn't know them. And so we got this awareness of, we're hardly connecting at all. We see each other. I mean, David was in and out of the RV all day long. I would see him, he would see me, but I'm busy with the kids and he's busy doing, all of the evangelism things. And finally, we just sat down and we were like, we need to do something about this. So we established, we called it Dave and Bethlie night. We called it To the Children, Mommy, Daddy night. And it was Wednesday night after church. We would not accept any invitations to go out to eat. And I would get the children home as soon as possible without being rude to the people. Just get them home, back to the RV. And they knew Wednesday night, we're not going to dawdle. We're going to get a quick snack and we're going to get to bed. And once you get in there, that's where you stay because Mommy and Daddy are going to have a date. And we didn't get to go anywhere, but we were alone. We could talk. We could play a game. We could watch a movie together. We could eat together. We could just be just us. And it was wonderful. So we had to kind of finagle that date night. And then as the children got older and they want to join in the conversation all of the time, we have several children who are like, especially if we would get quiet, they're like, well, what are they talking about? I want to know, and so they would want to join in the conversation. It's just fine. That's normal. We weren't having a lot of connect time. So then we realized both of us, he would have a cup of coffee in the afternoon. I would have a cup of tea. And we were like, well, why don't we just do that together? And so even if all we had was 10 minutes in that day, we would get our quick cuppa and we would sit down and just be like, hey, how are you? My name's Bethlie, or whatever. So just having that connect time. Another thing that has helped me so much, and I had to learn this as a young bride, was not having unrealistic expectations, especially if you are in full-time ministry, if with social media, or just even talking to the other girls at your church, they live a totally different life. They do. And so that they get to go out every Friday night or even have the whole weekend to themselves because the grandparents keep the kids over the weekend. You may not have that. And so we can't put those unrealistic expectations on ourselves or even our husbands, because when we do that, then we start to get discontent. And we just can't. We have to realize that our ministry life is going to look totally different than other people's. And we have to accept that. And we have to maybe come up with new things that we do. Okay, we're going to sit down for 10 minutes. We're going to do that. We're going to have Dave and Bethlie night or whatever. That's the only thing we can do. It's not going to look like them, because girls, when we get discontent, that's what starts pulling us away from the Lord and our walk with the Lord, and eventually can pull our husbands away from his walk with the Lord, because he can't meet those expectations. He really can't. And so we need to allow God just to direct us in that way. What can we do as a couple that works for us? It's not going to be Instagram worthy. It's okay, but it works for us and it keeps our marriage sweet.
That's so encouraging to hear, because even not just in ministry, for anybody, everyone's different.
Right.
And I think something I learned going into marriage, and now having been married 2 years, which is not very long at all, not much experience, but it's enough for me to realize that being flexible is key.
Yes.
Because like knowing each other is the most important thing. You don't have to
Right.
be like every other couple, and you
Right.
don't have to, like, you know each other, and you know when you need that talk or that time together.
Right.
And it's always possible to keep that relationship central,
Yes.
no matter what.
All about intentionality, I
Right.
think. Just being willing to just sit down and talk about it. Okay.
We're
Right.
super honest.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
honesty is always the best policy.
Communication. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Absolutely. And just that awareness of, when was the last time I really kissed you? When was the last time
Yeah.
we had a date? You know, and just being aware of those things, because it is important, because ministry will be nothing if your marriage is nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Your marriage needs to
So
be
true.
priority.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And your kids to see that, I think is also
Oh,
important.
yes.
That you're willing to set aside time together and prioritize that relationship.
Right.
I have one last question to ask you that you've already talked about this specifically in a few areas of some like decisions that you've specifically made. Hey, we need to change something here, like in your marriage or with the family fun day.
Right.
Is there any other example where you really had to sit down and make a hard decision about something ministry versus family related, and how you had to make that decision?
Well, just being aware, we have gotten into this pattern, and it has been so helpful. We didn't know to do this when we were first married, but just this pattern of constant evaluation. Where are we? Where are the children? You're going to know where your ministry is. You are, because the Lord is working or the Lord is not working. And okay, we need to pick this up. We need to do this differently. So ministry, yes, you are evaluating, but you're just evaluating as you're doing it. Marriage and family, you can just be going. And then, like I said, all of a sudden you're kind of smacked up the side of the head with, where did that come from? So just having that evaluation time has helped us so much, where we just sit down and, okay, where are we? Where are the kids? As we got older, you know, you have this picture of where your ministry is headed and how it's going to be. And sometimes it is nothing like you thought it was going to be. And one of those things that I thought was that as the children got older, there would be more freedom. Now there is in some ways, like when I had all 5 of them at home and was homeschooling, I could not have run and done ladies' retreats like this, not like I do. But even then, being at the season of life I am, that is something we have to prayerfully consider, because it does impact my family. I can be away from Charity. She's good. She can homeschool on her own. She can dress herself, feed herself, all of those wonderful things. She does okay. But if I were gone, you know, maybe 6 weekends out of the fall or spring instead of 2 or 3 weekends out of the fall or spring, that would make a big difference in her life and a big difference in my married life. So even that you have to evaluate that. We went through, we are still in some college years. And while there have been some summers where our children are, they come home from college for a little bit, but then they go off to ministry, like a camp ministry or something like that, or they intern at a church. There are other times where they need to make money. So they come home, and they're home all summer long. I love camp ministry. My husband preaches at camp all summer long. We love it, and I love to go to all of them. And so I thought, well, my kids are older. I'm going to go and do all of this. And you know what? Sometimes I haven't been able to, because I have a college student who's home who's maybe 18 or 19 or 20 years old. And while, yes, they can be home for maybe a week or so by themselves, they're okay. They are. But they still need some parental guidance. They need someone there to meet them at the end of their work day and be like, hey, how are you? And they need that companionship. They also need that accountability. We have learned that a 19-year-old left to himself for too many weeks is not a good thing. They need that accountability. And so that's a hard thing for David and I to sit down and say, okay, we might be apart for several weeks this summer. Hopefully not several weeks in a row, but there will be weeks I can't go with you because we have a college student at home. Another season of life would then be maybe aging or sick parents, where my mom, both of my parents are in heaven now, but my mom had cancer and she had to face some surgeries and she needed someone with her. And so David and I had to sit down and say, you know what, this is our priority right now for me to go and be with mom. And that will take a hit in our ministry because I'm not going to be right there with you. And that will be a little hard on our marriage because we're not going to be together for weeks and weeks and weeks. So that was another thing that we had to evaluate. What do we need to do here? And what's the best thing for mom? What's the best thing for our family? What's the best thing for our ministry? So there are, in every season of life, I think there are evaluations to be made. There are hard decisions to be made.
Right. Yes, I think this whole podcast has just reminded me of the importance of constant evaluation. Just in my own life, like to never assume I've arrived in the area of priorities. It's really a matter of like that constant discernment and walking with the Lord and feeling out, like you said, being aware and communicating well with your husband, your family about what's best for you and following the Lord in that.
good.
So thank you so much for your help
Yes,
in
thank you.
talking through all of those areas.
my
Super
pleasure.
helpful.
We hope that you enjoyed today's episode of Friday Focus, presented by the Walk Talks podcast. Make your plans to join us next week for another set of podcast episodes that will encourage you in your walk with the Lord Jesus Christ.